My name is Maya. I am 25 years old, but sometimes I feel as though I have lived 100 lives, each one marked not by joy but by silence. I am not the kind of girl people notice. My face is ordinary, my voice soft, my steps quiet. In a crowded room, I am the shadow that slips past without drawing attention, the girl who sits in the corner with her hands folded, pretending not to mind that nobody is looking her way. But inside me there is a world that never stops aching. I grew up in a home where words were few and love was absent. My father lived in silence, my mother in exhaustion, my brother in storms of anger. And me. I lived in the spaces between them, invisible. I learned early that birthdays pass without celebration, that tears fall unheard, that loneliness can be louder than any noise. Yet, despite everything, I have always carried a fragile hope, like a candle burning in a storm, that someday someone would stay. Not for a moment, not by accident, but truly stay. I write in notebooks that nobody reads. Stories of laughter, warmth, belonging, the things I have never known but still believe in. My words are my companions, the only proof that I exist beyond the silence. If you looked at me from the outside, you might say I am ordinary. But inside, I am a collection of broken pieces held together by hope. Hope that one day, when all else has faded, there will be at least one person who does not leave. Because my story is not about the many who walked away. It is about the one who stayed. I was never the kind of child people noticed. Some kids walk into a room and fill it with light, laughter, or noise. I wasn't like that. I was the quiet one who sat in the corner, clutching the hem of my dress, staring at the ground as though the cracks in the tiles could give me answers I didn't yet know how to ask for. My earliest memory of loneliness comes from the playground of my primary school. I must have been about 6 years old. Children were chasing each other across the field, shouting, squealing, their shoes pounding against the earth. I stood near the old swing set, waiting for someone, anyone, to call my name. They never did. The swing swayed in the wind, the chains creaking, and I tried to imagine that sound was a voice speaking to me, telling me I wasn't completely alone. It hurt in a way I couldn't explain. Children aren't supposed to understand emptiness, but I think I did. At home, things weren't much better. My parents were there physically but never emotionally. My mother worked long hours at a garment factory, returning home exhausted, her hands rough, her shoulders slumped. My father, well, he was there but in a way that felt absent. He spent his evenings in front of the television, the blue glow reflecting off his tired face, saying little, noticing less. I would sit at the table, hoping someone would ask about my day. My little voice often stayed trapped in my throat, and eventually I learned not to try. Silence was easier than disappointment. But silence is heavy. Seeps into your bones, becomes part of who you are. I remember birthdays the most. Other children had balloons, friends, cake smeared across grinning faces. My birthdays were quieter. Sometimes a small cake, sometimes just a hurried kiss from my mother as she left for her night shift. The only company I had was the candlelight flickering on the wall as I whispered wishes into the air. I don't even remember what I wished for, but I'm sure it was always the same. Please, someone, don't leave me. As I grew older, I learned how to blend into the background. Teachers barely noticed me. Friends came and went, but none stayed long enough for me to trust them. I started writing in a little notebook, scribbling down stories about imaginary people who lived the life I wished for. People who laughed loudly, who had circles of friends, who belonged somewhere. Writing became my only companion, the only place where I felt seen. Still, there was always a piece of me that longed for something real. For someone real. The years blurred. By the time I was 15, I had mastered the art of pretending. Smiling when necessary, nodding at the right time, giving just enough of myself so people wouldn't think I was strange. But inside, the loneliness remained. A constant ache, like a shadow that never left, no matter how brightly the sun shone. High school was supposed to be different. Everyone said it would be the time when you found yourself, found your people, found your place in the world. For me, it was just another stage where the curtains opened and I played my role. The quiet girl, the background character, the one who walked home alone while groups of friends lingered, laughing, their voices carrying in the wind long after I'd disappeared down the empty street. Sometimes I would stop and stare at the horizon, where the sky turned orange and pink. The beauty of it hurt me because it reminded me of everything I wanted but didn't have. Hand to hold. A voice to say my name. A reason to believe I wasn't invisible. And then, one rainy afternoon, something happened that etched itself into my memory forever. It was after school. The sky had broken open, rain falling in sheets, drenching everything in seconds. I didn't have an umbrella, of course. I never thought to bring one. So I stood under the tin awning of the school gate, hugging my books to my chest, waiting for the rain to ease. Students rushed past, huddled together beneath shared umbrellas, their laughter ringing in the storm. That's when I saw her. A girl from my class, someone I barely spoke to, approached me. Her name was Aisha. She had an umbrella, bright red against the gray sky. She stopped in front of me, tilting her head. "You're not going home?" she asked. I shook my head. "I'll wait." She hesitated for a moment, then held the umbrella out toward me. "Come. We'll share." I remember blinking at her, unsure if I'd heard right. Nobody had ever said something like that to me. Nobody had ever chosen to stay with me in the rain. The walk home was short, but it felt like something sacred. The rain tapped against the umbrella, a steady rhythm, while we walked close together to stay dry. I remember the warmth of her shoulder brushing against mine, the faint scent of jasmine from her hair. For the first time in years I felt noticed. When we reached the corner where our paths split, she smiled. "See you tomorrow." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart strangely full. One small act of kindness, one person who stopped, one person who stayed, just for a few minutes, was enough to make me believe maybe I wasn't completely invisible after all. I didn't know it then, but that moment would become the seed of everything that followed. Because life has a way of breaking you down until only the truest people remain. And in the end, only one person stayed with me. If school was a place where I felt invisible, home was a place where I felt unwanted. Our small apartment always smelled faintly of detergent and dust. The walls were pale, almost gray, and the paint was peeling in the corners. My mother kept everything neat, but no matter how much she scrubbed or polished, the rooms always felt heavy, like the weight of silence clung to them. My father wasn't a cruel man. Not in the way some fathers are, with raised hands and angry voices, but his absence was a kind of cruelty all the same. He worked as a mechanic during the day and spent his nights watching TV, drinking tea, or staring blankly at the window as though life was happening somewhere far away and he was just a spectator. He rarely spoke to me, and when he did, it was only about practical things. Lock the door when I'm out. Don't waste electricity. Did you finish your homework? Never anything about how I was feeling. Never anything about me. My mother was different, but in some ways the silence between us was heavier. She was always tired, her body worn down by years of factory work. Sometimes she would sit on the edge of her bed, rubbing her hands, the skin cracked from chemicals and fabric dust. I wanted to sit beside her, to lay my head in her lap like I did when I was little, but I didn't. Something invisible kept me back, as though her exhaustion had built a wall I couldn't cross. Meals were quiet. We'd sit around the table, my father chewing slowly, my mother sipping her tea, me pushing rice around my plate. The clinking of utensils was often the loudest sound. I used to imagine we were actors in a play where the script had been lost. Nobody knew their lines, so we sat in silence, waiting for something that never came. I sometimes wondered if they loved me. Not in the dramatic sense of neglect, but in the quiet sense of indifference. They gave me food, clothes, a roof. But love. Love is supposed to feel like warmth, like someone seeing you even when the world doesn't. What I got was duty, obligation, a hollow kind of care that kept me alive but not alive enough. And then there was my brother. He was 3 years older than me, and unlike me, he was the kind of person who demanded attention. Loud, stubborn, always getting into fights at school. My parents gave him all the energy they didn't give me. Every night, the apartment was filled with arguments about his grades, his behavior, his friends. My father shouted, my mother cried, My brother slammed doors. In that chaos, I faded even further into the background. Sometimes, though, I caught my brother watching me. His eyes softened in a way that made me wonder if he understood my silence, if he knew I carried loneliness like a second skin. But he never said anything. Not once. And so the silence continued, even between us. I spent most of my evenings in my small room. It had a single bed, a wooden desk, and a cracked window that let in the city noise. Car horns, barking dogs, distant laughter. I would sit by that window and write in my notebook. Stories about families who laughed together, who celebrated birthdays, who noticed when someone was sad. Stories about homes that felt like homes. One evening, my mother walked into my room while I was writing. She looked tired, her hair tied back, her eyes shadowed. She saw the notebook and frowned. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Writing," I said softly. She sighed almost impatiently. "Writing won't fill your stomach. Focus on your studies. That's what matters." I nodded, closing the notebook, but my heart sank. She didn't mean to hurt me. I knew that, but she didn't understand. Writing wasn't just words on a page. It was the only place I could breathe. The only place I wasn't invisible. That night, I cried quietly under my blanket, the sound muffled so no one would hear. I wasn't crying because she scolded me. I was crying because I realized she would never really see me. None of them would. The loneliness at home grew heavier as the years passed. My father's silence became thicker, my mother's exhaustion deeper, my brother's rebellion louder. And in the middle of it all, I existed like a shadow on the wall, present but unnoticed, breathing but unheard. Yet, in that same darkness, I clung to the smallest fragments of hope. I remembered the day Aisha shared her umbrella with me. The way her simple kindness had filled me with light for days afterward. I held on to that memory like a lifeline, proof that the world wasn't entirely empty, that somewhere out there people had the capacity to stay. Still at home, the shadows kept creeping in. I often wondered what it would feel like to have someone knock on my door, sit on the edge of my bed and simply ask, "Are you okay?" Just those 3 words. Nothing more. But nobody ever did. Instead, I grew up in silence, learning how to carry my loneliness without letting it show. My family gave me food and shelter, but not warmth. They gave me survival, but not love. And though I told myself I didn't need it, the truth is, every night before I fell asleep, I whispered the same wish into the dark. "Please, someone, don't leave me." Because I already knew, long before life proved it, that one day, when everything else fell apart, only one person would stay. When I was 17, I thought life would finally begin. I believed, like so many others, that leaving high school meant stepping into a brighter world where everything made sense, where the loneliness I carried would fade, and where I'd finally discover who I was meant to be. College was supposed to be my escape. I worked hard for it. Despite the silence at home, despite the emptiness that followed me like a shadow, I studied late into the night under the dim yellow glow of my desk lamp. I dreamed of walking into a place where nobody knew me as the quiet, invisible girl. I wanted a new start. And in a way I got it. But dreams have sharp edges, and they cut deeper when you hold them too tightly. The first day of college was overwhelming. The campus buzzed with life. Students talking, laughing, calling out to each other across the courtyard. I clutched my bag to my chest and walked carefully, as though I were intruding in someone else's world. I tried to look confident, but inside I was trembling. Every time someone glanced at me, I imagined them seeing right through me, seeing the lonely, uncertain girl I was. Still, I kept reminding myself, "This is your chance. Don't waste it." In lectures, I sat quietly at the back, scribbling notes furiously, afraid of missing anything. Around me, students whispered, made jokes, exchanged numbers. I wanted so badly to join in, but the words stuck in my throat. My silence was like a wall I couldn't climb over. Days turned into weeks, and slowly I started to talk to people. Small conversations at first, about assignments, about the weather, about the long lines in the cafeteria. Nothing deep, but enough to make me feel like I existed. One girl in particular stood out. Her name was Nadia. She was everything I wasn't, loud, confident, always surrounded by people. Yet for some reason she noticed me. "You're too quiet," she said one afternoon, laughing as we walked out of class together. "It's like you're hiding a whole world in your head." I blushed, unsure how to respond. Nobody had ever said something like that to me before. From that day, she started pulling me into her circle. At lunch, she would wave me over to sit with her friends. At first I felt like an outsider, awkward and misplaced, but slowly I learned to smile, to nod, to laugh at the right times. For a while it felt like maybe, just maybe, I belonged. But belonging is fragile, and disappointment comes quietly. As months passed, I realized I wasn't really part of the group. I was a guest, tolerated but not needed. They made plans without me, whispered secrets I wasn't included in, shared laughter I couldn't quite understand. Nadia liked me, I think, but she didn't need me the way I needed her. One evening after class, I saw her walking out with another group of friends. She was laughing, her arm linked with someone else's, and when she saw me, she only gave a small wave before disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, frozen, the ache in my chest growing heavy. It shouldn't have hurt, but it did. Because for a brief moment, I had allowed myself to believe that I mattered. The truth was clear. I was still the quiet girl, the background shadow. Nothing had really changed. But life has a way of dangling hope even when it intends to break you. It happened in my second year of college. There was a boy, his name was Rafiq. He wasn't like the others. He noticed things. Small things. The way I chewed my pen when I was nervous. The way I looked out of the window during lectures as though my mind was somewhere far away. One day he leaned over during class and whispered, "You always look like you're listening to a song nobody else can hear." I turned to him, startled, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled without forcing it. We started talking more. First about classes and books. Then about music, about childhood, about fears. With him words came easier. Felt safe. Like I didn't have to pretend. He made me laugh in a way I didn't know I could. And when he looked at me, really looked at me, I felt seen. Truly seen. It didn't take long for my heart to do what hearts always do. It hoped. I began to imagine a future where I wasn't alone. A future where someone chose me, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but out of love. For the first time in years, the loneliness didn't feel so heavy. But dreams, as I said, have sharp edges. It was during a group project when I found out. A friend of his, without thinking, mentioned his girlfriend. The words hit me like a stone. I tried to laugh it off, tried to hide the crack forming inside me. But later that night, when I was alone, the tears came. He had never lied to me. He never said he was mine. But my heart had built a story without permission. And now it was falling apart. The next time we talked, I pretended everything was fine. I nodded, smiled, even laughed at his jokes. But something inside me had broken. I knew better than to hope. I knew better than to dream. And yet I had let myself believe. That was my mistake. College ended the way most things in my life seemed to. With quiet disappointment. I graduated with decent grades, a degree I wasn't sure I wanted, and a heart that felt heavier than before. Friends drifted away, busy with their own lives. Nadia stopped calling. Rafiq became just another memory I couldn't erase. And me. I walked across the stage to receive my certificate, clapping echoing in the hall, but nobody from my family was there to see it. I smiled for the photographs, but inside, I whispered the same words I had whispered since childhood. Please, someone, don't leave me. Because even then I knew. Dreams may fade, friends may go, love may disappoint, but somewhere in the shadows of my life, only one person would stay. After college, life became a blur of routine. I found a job at a small office in the city, a place filled with fluorescent lights and the constant hum of computers. My days were measured in files, deadlines, and the ticking clock on the wall. It wasn't exciting, but it was something. It kept me moving forward, even when my heart still carried the weight of old disappointments. And then, when I least expected it, love found me. His name was Imran. He worked in the same office, though in a different department. He wasn't extraordinary in the way movies portray love. No dazzling smile, no perfect words, but he was kind. Kindness was something I had always been starved for. It started with small gestures. Offering to carry a stack of files when he noticed my arms full. Asking if I wanted tea when he went to the cafeteria. Saying good morning with a smile that felt genuine. For a girl like me, whose life had been defined by absence and silence, these small things felt monumental. We began talking more about work, about the city, about little things that filled the spaces between. One evening, when most of the office had emptied, he lingered at my desk. "You're always so quiet," he said, tilting his head. "But there's something about you. Like you feel everything more deeply than the rest of us." I looked at him, startled, because it felt like he had seen straight through me. And for the first time I let someone in. Our relationship grew slowly, like a flame nurtured carefully in the dark. We started going out for tea after work. He would walk me to the bus stop, standing with me until my bus arrived, even though it made him late getting home. I began to look forward to those moments, the way his presence softened the edges of my loneliness. One night, as we stood beneath a flickering street lamp, he reached for my hand. "Can I?" he asked softly. My heart pounded as I nodded, and when his fingers laced through mine, I felt something I had never felt before. Belonging. It wasn't grand. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for someone like me, real was enough. For a while, I allowed myself to believe I had found what I'd been searching for. I pictured a future with him. Shared meals, laughter echoing through small rooms, the comfort of not having to face life alone. But love, at least in my life, never seemed to last. The first cracks appeared slowly, in the form of distance. Imran began to cancel plans, his excuses piling up. Work, family, tiredness. At first I told myself it was normal. Relationships weren't perfect. People got busy. But the distance grew. Our conversations, once filled with warmth, became shorter. His messages came hours late, sometimes not at all. When we met, his eyes seemed elsewhere, as though I was no longer the center of his attention. One evening I asked him quietly, "Is something wrong?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, of course not. Just stress. Don't overthink." But I did overthink. Every night, lying awake in my small room, I wondered if I was losing him. And deep down I knew I was. The truth came on a rainy afternoon. I had stayed late at the office, finishing a report. As I walked past the cafeteria, I saw him, sitting at a corner table, laughing with another woman. Their heads leaned close, their hands almost touching. Something inside me broke. I didn't confront him right away. Couldn't. Instead, I carried the image with me like a wound I pressed my fingers against, over and over, even though it hurt. When I finally asked him, his silence told me everything. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said at last, his voice low. "But I think I love her." The words cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. All those years of loneliness, all those whispered prayers for someone to stay. And now, just when I thought I had found it, it slipped through my fingers like sand.